Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Weirdly Magical podcast with Jen and Lou. I'm Louise, or Lou. I'm an astrologer, shamanic practitioner, and writer of modern astrology. Harness the stars to find your soul's true purpose, and my dog's sneezing. I offer soul astrology readings, classes, and I also have an online community or membership site, which is now going to be connected to my website, which I'm very excited about. And I have different levels of membership, and you'll also be able to find all my products there going forward. Classes, everything, all in one place, heaven. But all can be found at louiseedington.com with one D. And I help you to live in deep self-awareness and acceptance. And Jen, take it away.
Hi, and I'm Jen Duchene, or Jen, I don't know if we're supposed to say our last names. I am an Akashic healer, an illuminator, numerologist, teacher, creator of the Illuminating Journey Cards, and author of Le Chic Cocoon. I offer illuminating healing and clearing of Akashic and numeric readings, workshops, and I have a community Soul Pillow Salon, which is email-based and live. There's some live for deep soul connection, clarity, and healing. And all of this can be found on my website, jenduchene.com, or by emailing me at jen@jenduchene.com.
Cool. So today we're going to be looking at the Taurus new moon, which takes place on May the 4th. I'll go into more detail about that in just a moment. But before we dive into the energies, just some housekeeping. Our podcast is getting some great reviews on iTunes and some just stars as well, all welcome. So if you love our podcast, please subscribe at your favorite podcast provider and go to iTunes and give us a hopefully 5-star review. Plus, we also now have a Patreon, and for just $3 a month, you can support our podcast. And we'll be introducing special patron-only content moving forward. And that's patreon.com/weirdly magical. And lastly, each episode, we are going to feature a listener question if we have one. We don't actually have a question for this episode, which is fine. But if you have a burning question about anything, about the cosmos, about astrology, about numbers, whatever your question, please email to weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com. And one question will be chosen at random and featured on an episode. No personal details will be shared on the podcast other than your first name. So send us your questions. So diving into the energies, as I said, we are today looking at the energy of the Taurus new moon and what's happening between now. Today, we're recording on the 19th, on the day of the full moon, a bit ahead of usual schedule because I am traveling next week. But we have some pretty intense energy shifts leading up to the full moon. Sorry, the new moon. The new moon is on May the 4th, 2019 at 11:45 p.m. Universal Time. That's London, England time. And it takes place at 14 degrees and 10 minutes of Taurus. And we'll talk about some of the aspects to it when we're actually kind of just discussing. But leading up to it, I do want to mention a couple of things we've got going on, because we've got some pretty intense energy shifts, as I said. We have, in the next 24 hours, Sun going into Taurus, Venus going into Aries. We won't talk about that so much. But in 3 days' time, on Monday, the 22nd. We have the Sun conjunct Uranus, which is a pretty big deal. We have Venus conjunct Chiron in Aries, just about the same time. We also have Pluto turning retrograde on the 24th. After that, we have Mars squaring Neptune. So Mars is in Gemini and will be squaring Neptune in Pisces. And incidentally, Mars is going out of bounds tomorrow on the 20th until June the 15th. So any aspects Mars makes during this period are going to be crazily intense, because when Mars is out of bounds, he's pretty wild. So, and then on the last day of April, we have Saturn going, almost the last day, we have Saturn turning retrograde in Capricorn and conjoining the South Node and opposing the North Node. And then we have, in the first week of May, well, in fact, the first 3 days of May leading up to this new moon, we have a whole bunch of Mercury aspects, Mercury being in Aries. Mercury will aspect that outer bounds Mars, square the nodes, square Saturn, square Pluto, and remember both of those have just turned retrograde, and he will finish with a trine to Jupiter, and then we have the new moon. So we've got an awful lot of energy. We've got a lot of energy shifts of direction. And so kind of some very wild card energy, as I kind of like to talk about it, with that Mars really kind of causing disruption, as I know today, because he's sitting on my moon and my Lilith and opposing my Jupiter just before he goes out of bounds. And Gemini is the mind, Aries is the head, and I have a lovely headache. But incidentally, before Jen dives in with the numbers, I do want to say that the new moon chart is almost Jen's solar return chart, because it's just before her birthday. So you can all wish her happy birthday when you listen to this.
Yes, thanks. That's pretty exciting that we're talking about it and my birthday follows.
Yeah.
So that's really awesome.
Yes.
An exciting time. I wanted to kind of address some of the energies, or the numeric energies, Akashic energies, kind of, cosmic energies that are happening, in relation to what Lou was talking about. This period we're in a very intense period right now for another week at least. I know ongoing, but this is specific to this idea of us learning to manifest in a new way. So what's happening is the reality that we have kind of looked at as our reality is starting to morph and change and soften. And we're in this period right now where we're being kind of bombarded with information, like kind of changing our minds, like that's all that energy. And particularly this weekend, the 19, 20, 21, this is very potent energy coming in, helping us to kind of see beneath the veils and begin to project the kind of reality that we believe in. And I think this is an important distinction, between what we just say we want and what we believe in, is where the difference lies. Because just because we say, oh, I want this, that's not going to make it happen. We have to actually believe in it, or we have to do the things that are actually going to move us in that direction. So we have to take actual steps to see that reality changed, which is very interesting. And I'm beginning to see with myself. I started getting after the full moon last night, woke me up, and I was like, oh, okay, I can see now how I've been deluding myself, right, about certain things or beliefs that have been kind of hovering around me that I have not seen. So I think that's really interesting. And I pulled a card from the Illuminating Journey card for this moon and this period, and it is the Soul Portal 31, which I find fascinating, right? Because 31 is a 4, and it's the genius number. And this card, for those of you who can't see, is a picture of, it's kind of the dragon's lair, or that's how I look at it. So it's this space where this woman's sitting on a rock, and she has all these jewels in her lap and pearls, and she's kind of contemplating the jewels of her life, right? And this is kind of where we are. We're contemplating the gifts and the experiences we've had and what we think it means, and now what we're choosing to make it mean. Considering the fact that we're creating something different, how are we choosing to see these things? Now that we have the wisdom to create the pearls we desire. And around her, there are dragons flying, there's other piles of jewels, there's some big trees that are the baobab trees, which are wisdom trees, but in actual fact, every part of this tree is used. Like nothing goes to waste, and of course they live for thousands of years. They are self-sufficient as well. So I find this kind of a fascinating idea that this is what's come up at this time, is this idea of being in contemplation with our own creativity. Like, what are we creating?
It's a lot to do with the core values, I think, with the Taurus season coming. I always think of this, we've had this card before on the podcast. Yes. I know, and I always think of it as the Game of Thrones card.
That's funny. I've never watched the Game of Thrones, so that's
so for those of you that watch Game of Thrones, you will probably know what I mean. Because Game of Thrones, really, when it comes down to it, is about what we really value and things too. So
right. And that's, I mean, just the title alone is a very exciting title, right? Game of Thrones. That's kind of, we get to decide what throne we are either throwing into the ring, or we're chasing after and thinking has value to us and what we're prepared to do. So I think that's fascinating. So as to the numeric aspects, so right now we're in this intense numeric aspect, remembering that we're in a 12 universal year and a 19 calendar year, which means new beginnings, releasing our old thoughts, our old ideas, and kind of shining a light on who we are. And the 12, which is 2 + 1 + 9, that gives us the 12, which is a 3, 1 + 2 is 3, which reminds us everything is focus, connect, and articulate in some way. You know, we begin to create either with our voices or through the things we do. And then we go back again, right? 1, 2, 3. Well, this new moon we're talking about is a 4. It's on the 4th day, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the number of the moon, the degree, is 14, which is a 5, 1 and 4 and 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at play here, which is pretty exciting. Like, it's this idea that, and we've seen this pattern happening quite often over the period of time. The other thing that's very fascinating about the May energy is that we have a 17 universal month, and 17 is the number of immortality. So it allows us to choose the legacy that we want to leave. It also reminds us that we are immortal. And what do we do? And it comes back to that idea of the Game of Thrones. If we are immortal and we get to kind of change or shape our reality, what does that look like? And the other aspect is right now we're in a very intuitive time, because April is a very intuitive month. It's highly intuitive. So it's helping us break through kind of some of these old shells and stuff that have been kind of holding us rigid. So awareness is one thing, right? It's great when your mind gets changed, you see new things, but then you have to start to take action. And the 4 of the day plus the 17, which makes an 8, is a combo that creates, it's that kind of fated thing. We know fateful things will happen when we have this combination.
And incidentally, you mentioned the 17, and Venus is the ruler of Taurus, so it's the ruler of the new moon. And she is at 17 degrees of Aries on the new moon. So she's tying that 17 in as well. And in the sign of Aries, which is very much about our identity. Who am I? So, so
Yes.
all these things are really kind of coming in together. Um, I must admit, when I look at kind of the whole energy in the chart, I see a lot of kind of really a lot of mental overwhelm. But maybe that's just me feeling it with the Mars in Gemini affecting so much in my chart. But I do think we're going to be kind of bombarded with information and things being revealed between now and the new moon. From within and from without. We're seeing it happen kind of in the collective with just like the burning of the Notre Dame, not just the burning of that, but what it's bringing up. Suddenly we realize, like, they've raised how much money so far from very few very, very wealthy people. It's kind of being put in our face about kind of the patriarchy and the oligarchy, and then we're being asked what we value. I'm seeing so many people talk about, well, yes, it's beauty, yes, it's art, yes, it's an amazing building, but what about, like, the earth? What about the coral reefs that are being destroyed? Why are we not putting all this into restoring them? That kind of thing. So it's what's really at our core values. We're being asked all the time to look at all this. I do think the Pluto and Saturn retrogrades happening or the stations happening at the same time, especially conjunct the South Node, are also revealing all this stuff. I must admit, I kind of kind of walk around all the time at the moment thinking the patriarchy's on its way out. I woke up this morning thinking it's not just the Catholic Church, it's all Abrahamic religions. They're just going to die. They're going to go.
Indeed.
It's just, but what is really, how are we really living? What values are we living by? I just think we're being asked that and bombarded with information at a macro and micro level. So.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. But for me, what I get is, and I find this kind of interesting because I think it's true. We are being bombarded mentally and spiritually, emotionally, and all different levels, because that's what waking up is about. That's what being revealed to ourselves is. I mean, we've lived under this illusion that, I only need to do this, or this is what it looks like to be successful, or just to survive, or, there's a lot of kind of putting up with or accepting certain things. And what was coming to mind when you were talking about those people that are giving money to the Notre Dame revival, or whatever it's being called, yes, this is bringing up a lot of issues. But for me, it's really this idea that we want these people to come along with us, right? Because of course, people who have money, like we have enabled this lifestyle, right? That there are certain people that have a lot, and there's a lot of people who have nothing, and then a bunch of people in the middle being squeezed. It's like a crazy sandwich. And so the way we've done it is through kind of negative reinforcement, right? Look at those people, they look what they spend their money on, and all this kind of stuff. Or we can go with the idea that, first of all, these people can spend their money on whatever they want because they're in that position. Secondly, why are they doing it, and how do we make them, or not, maybe make them is the wrong word, how do we encourage them? How do we invite them to come into what we believe in? And I think that's where things have to shift. Like, we have to go to that place of, I don't want to be focused on the parts that I don't agree with. I want to be focused on how we can make this work. Because obviously those people are doing it for a reason, right? They're not just, and it could be an emotional reason. There's also a reason because they're involved in, it looks good, right? Looks good. They get this and that.
They want their name on it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, because the one guy said they don't care about the tax break. I don't know if they want their name on as such, but you're right. In a sense, they get goodwill for it, right? they get the attachment. But how do we make these other things, the earthly things that we're looking at, attractive enough and kind of sexy, so they want to put their name on that too, right? And so I think that's kind of what the conversation is. When we come back, if we're talking about values, our values have to come back to this place of, we're not judging somebody else for the values they have. We're kind of showing them what else is possible and what else is what we desire to create this reality that will actually impact all of us on a much bigger scale.
I do think we kind of have to see this before we can invite them in, though, which kind of
totally. We have to have that fight, right? We have to have that fight and that explosion, and this is what you're talking about. This is Mars in Out of Bounds. This is the Gemini thing. And actually 14, I didn't talk about it, but this is a key point you bring up, is the number 14 is about expressing ourselves in the world. It is considered the media number. So it's about describing how we feel. It's about really getting to the root of the stuff, which is Taurian, right? It's this idea that, oh, we have moaned behind closed doors in a sense about all this stuff, but we've never been voluble out in the public eye. We have never really got together, but we haven't had the resources. But now we have the media that can, social media, and we can go, wow, this is what we want. Hey, there's more than just me. I'm not just one crazy person. So we can actually begin to activate this conversation you're talking about, and feel strong. When, in the old days, they would just kind of roll us over and, call in the cops and destroy us. And who knows, they may try to do that again. The difference is we're not buying it anymore. We're not as stupid as we were, or as desperate or afraid as we were, many times before.
I see the Extinction Rebellion in London is just, it started this, well, it's been going on for a while, but the particular current demonstration started on the 15th and is still going strong. 400 arrests in, but it's all good-natured. People are singing, playing music, dancing, and saying, we don't want to die. All happy.
Yes.
I kind of feel that's very Uranus in Taurus, actually.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It is. And with this idea, with this Venus energy, like in all of it, like lining up, we've talked about some of the aspects as well, with the support of the great mothers in the system, or the great female energy, which is our intuition. It is that aspect of helping us, and our innovation and our intelligence and our idea building, and going, wow, this is so much easier if we do this with joy, as opposed to I'm going to struggle and make it hard on myself. Right? So it's fascinating because, of course, the year number, the 12, is about joy. It's about creating joy, because that's what it is about being in creative mode, is, when kids are creating things, they're not miserable about what they're creating, right? They're excited about it and curious and going, let's make a party out of this. Everyone join in.
And I have to say, I think the fact, I love that it's at 14 for a start. I am a 14-5.
That's right.
And my ruling planet Jupiter is at 14 degrees of Sagittarius, so I'm being lit up again by all the charts. But enough about me. We have Venus ruling the new moon from Aries, but opposite Venus, we have Pallas Athena in the other Venus ruled sign, Libra. And Pallas Athena is together with Ceres over in Sagittarius, making a finger of fate or God pointing at this new moon. And whenever there's a finger of fate or finger of God, there's a real focus on it. So not only is it a new moon with, as Jen said, kind of the media number, it's also a number of change, I believe, isn't it? Kind of very immutable.
That's true.
Yeah.
Number of change. It's freedom. It's about freedom, liberty.
And we've got these two goddess energies pointing right at the new moon, and they're both retrograde. But Pallas Athena is wise justice. She's been retrograde in Libra for quite some time, you know, kind of seeking this kind of balance and harmony and yes, like social justice in the world. And there's Ceres over in Sagittarius. She's the great mother. She represents the harvest and grief and forgiveness and also the seasons. So another form of balance. And she's in Sagittarius, which is the sign of kind of the visionary truth, the future, the bigger picture. So we've got these two goddess energies pointing at this what is a very feminine, for want of or yin, let's say, new moon in Taurus, that's very earthy, very connected with the material world, and again, as we said, our values. So, you know, I keep saying it in all my writing and everything. You know, it's not women are not taking over. It's the divine feminine is taking her rightful place that was always really there, in equal energy with the yang energy, with the male energy in the cosmos. And there's so much pointing towards that. And this is yet another step in that, so that we can each become balanced within our masculine and feminine, and the world can become more balanced. Because the patriarchy, the age we're coming out of, is very masculine, young kind of energy of dominion and control, and that's nobody's fault. The energies were kind of that way. That's just how it is. And the fact that you know, all this is pointing to the new moon, Pluto and Saturn in Capricorn, which basically is the patriarchal sign, even though it's a feminine sign, is kind of saying more undermining of that, so that the feminine energy can rise up and they can start to balance out more and more. We're not there yet. We've got a long way to go, but each of these is a kind of step along the way. Right?
Yes, and I think what's really fascinating, you brought up quite a few fascinating points, Liz, that I wanted to just mention this kind of thought I had, that this is the third Venus-ruled full moon in a row, because we had the two Libra moons, and now
we had two full.
Oh no, this is the new moon, not a full, sorry, new moon, right?
But so we've had a lot of Venus-ruled lunation.
That's right. That's right. It wasn't exactly as I thought, but yes, third ruled moon, kind of, sort of in a row, missing the one other new moon. But so it's pretty fascinating. And then, of course, Pallas Athena is at 13 degrees, which is the number of the divine feminine. And that is also a 4, right? So it's a 4-day. Remember, I talked about the 4 series, which is the Great Mother, as you mentioned, and this kind of bringing in the mothering energy is at the 12, which links to our year, right? Yep. The year. And there's another 3 in here that I didn't mention, and that is the universal date of this new moon is a 21, which is about the truth, right? So 4 is about creating a new system, or laying the foundation, like birthing or earthing, really earthing these our ideas, our intuition into the earth. So we're starting to create a new system. And how do we do that? We have to start breaking up the old through fury and joy, and it's kind of all the emotional, our capacity to be emotional, which is something we haven't for a long time. Like, we've been emotional behind closed doors, we've taken medicine, we've done all these things to suppress our emotions, to deny that we have the right to have our emotions, you know, seen, because they would bother somebody. So this idea that we, you know, for many generations, thousands of years ago, things were one way. It was, you know, what they call kind of a goddess reigned world. Then it became the patriarchy. So it's like, okay, so now you guys, they complain. So like, okay, you guys get your turn to see what you can do about creating reality. And this is the path they chose, to use domination, fear, and suppression. And so, okay, at some point, that's the earthquake, right? That's the Uranus in Taurus, everything exploding, breaking up, all of our minds exploding at the same time. But allowing, at the same time, if we think about it, having this supportive wisdom and loving energy and reinvention, or I guess reinvention is the right word, reinvention of our values. Who are we and who do we want to be in the world? Like, what do we want to focus on in terms of what we believe is our debt and our abundance? And with all the support, I think it really speaks to that idea that we are being freed from that old rule, right? That, oh, I can't have something like, look, all these rich guys are deciding where we're going to put all the money. And it's like, that's the old way. But, right, the new way will be more generous, because they have proved over and over again that when we're generous to ourselves and to others, we don't feel lack. We don't have to create, walls and all these fences to keep people from trying to take what we have. Like, the only reason why people
when we've got
need
somebody
to take
trying to
someone
build a
else's
wall.
I know, right? So that's exactly, like, that's the last, what to say,
Exactly.
the last stand, this is like Custer's last stand or whatever, right? Oh yeah, I'm gonna, get really hard on you. And I think that's kind of the keys we have to remember. Like, we got to have our sense of humor around this. It's painful, but it's also freeing us. Like, when we can now face those people and say, okay, you've done your worst and I'm still here, I'm still standing, and I can still feel joy and still do all these things, and I'm not going away. Like, my desire and the desires of all of us that agree with each other are not going to go, oh yes, you're right, let's just all run away now and let you have everything. That's not going to happen.
And I love that you mentioned we've had so many Venus-ruled lunations, because, I mean, I must admit it's a personal obsession of mine at the moment, because I wrote an article like that channeled out of me the day that Notre Dame burned. It just all flooded, and the more I find out, I realize how significant in it symbolizes this fire, because it was built on a temple of Isis, and Isis is Venus. Also, there was a mosque in Jerusalem that burned on the same day, and I haven't had time yet to look into that, because that mosque would have been built on some other kind of sacred ground too, because Jerusalem is a sacred city. And it feels like everything you talked about, the explosion of Uranus in Taurus, which is very Venus ruled too. It does feel like this bubbling up and exploding of the institutions almost. It's but are just being represented, and the institutions, they represent our values that we've lived by, the rules, Capricorn, that we've lived by. Everything's just being really, really blown open right now. It's quite fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh, Jen disappeared.
To me, I think what's so significant. Oh yeah, I don't know what's happening with the internet. All of a sudden, we're talking about really key things, and then the internet starts.
Oh, yours went funny, did it? Oh no.
For me. Yeah. But what's kind of weird is, for me, when I heard about the Notre Dame thing, the idea of the spire, to me, that represents, the male, the penis. It's the idea, like, I'm going to take over, I'm going to dominate. Like, and we're talking about, and especially if we talk about the 19, which is interesting, because 19 is the number of the sun. And thousands of years ago, the sun was considered female. And then, at some point they changed it, because the males decided, oh, we want to be the sun, we want all of this, right? they claimed everything. And so pointing these spires into the kind of cosmos is the idea of kind of drawing the sun energy through them, right? So like, we have the power, we're the ones you're going to talk through. And so this to me is like the goddess or the goddess energy going, Venus, whatever you call it, going, you know, I've put up with your bullshit, little boys, right? Or whatever. I've put up with your games. You've had your turn. The contract is done. Okay, penis goes down, right? It's like pulling out all the power. And I mean, that's a huge declaration. The interesting thing is that it didn't destroy all of it. They did, you know, the gargoyles were saved because they had been removed because there was
because of the renovation work.
That's right, because the renovation. So it's all very perfect. It's a very feminine way to declare your time's up, right?
What I find interesting though is they removed the guardians 4 days before the fire, and actually removed their heads before they removed them. And the guardians were, of course, all male on it, and I do wonder how they're going to reintroduce that if they rebuild it. Will they rebuild it all as it was, or will they actually introduce more yin and yang, more male and female energy?
And I don't know if you saw that apparently there was the last statue, there was a beautiful statue of Isis in there that was removed because the people that lived there and created the temple were, you know, originally Celtics and, you know, Akkadians, etc.
The Parisi.
And that's right. And so they still worshipped Isis. That temple, you know, the Notre Dame was built. It's Our Lady, of course. And so one of the popes, I guess, I don't know, Roman, no, not popes, Roman leaders, they didn't like the sexual activity that happened with the pagans, right? They were very, like I say, evangelistic, right? They wanted everyone to be like them. They were very disapproving and controlling. And so he ordered that all of the statues would be burned. And that was in the 1500s, which is very close to the date we're looking at where, you know, the last time Saturn and Pluto were in the same position they are now. So
Charlemagne?
No, it wasn't Charlemagne. It was Roman, one of the Roman.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't. Tiberius. I think it was Tiberius. Actually, I said Stephen. It's Tiberius.
Yeah.
Who ordered that because they were very disapproving of sexual activity. You know, which is so strange, right? It's just like that whole evangelistic thing. Okay.
It is.
Everyone else behave yourself and don't do anything, and I'll do what I want. I'll do all these depraved things while, you know, under closed doors. So it's kind of very interesting to see that what has happened, and how now that we're in this period, you know, with rising disease, rising revolution. Because what often happens when you create disease is created by humans doing things to control, right? Like when they killed all the cats because they thought they were witches. This is also in the 1500s. Then, of course, disease rose because that's when the rodents, right, had the
they weren't killing the rodents. Yeah. So
and,
so much history weaving in with all this. I knew Charlemagne had something to do with Notre Dame.
She probably did, but I don't know all the history. So much, right?
Yeah, there's a statue of him in front of it. So, and I know he was something to do with it, but it is everything.
Well, they all tried.
Everything's kind of going back into roost, if you like, as you're pointing out. Yeah, from all these.
That's right. That's pretty fascinating, and I think all of them. Right. I mean, all of whoever's dominated the world, you know, or whatever was considered the world, would then try to lay their claim, right? Kind of like they would do with the woman, right? That's part of their system of raping into other groups, so they could control the woman through their children and through the birth line, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't.
We see that in All right. Yeah. All right. No, I was just going to say in the US, what's happening with this idea of kind of controlling women's bodies, right? Same story, right?
Yeah, and they are doubling down at the moment, and where they're trying to tighten up the rules about abortion and things to control women's bodies more, and it's kind of going to get worse, I think, before it's going to get better in that way. But again, I see all these things as kind of things that are happening to kind of hit us in our face for us to really figure out what we really do value to move forward into this new paradigm. Instead of thinking the world's at an end, oh my God, we're going backwards. It's going to be the Handmaid's Tale. It's going to be, I really don't believe it is,
Well, let's put it this way. We're creating the reality, so it can be whatever we decide. Yeah. However, the truth is that with all that stuff coming into our faces, what it does is it makes us remember, right? It's kind of like shock treatment in a sense. Like, it's like, how we tend to like, oh, that's terrible. And then we kind of go back to sleep. And then it's like, oh, that's terrible. So it's like all of the stuff is like breaking down all that old stuff. And I think if we remember that this is about joy, like finding our value through joy and expressing and going, that may be your desire, but I'm not in agreement with it. I am not going to follow your lead. I'm refusing to play in that playground.
Yeah. And, if anybody wants to get that vibe that Jen and I are talking about, just go, there's the Extinction Rebellion Facebook page. Go and just look at some of their videos of them being arrested. There's people being arrested with big smiles on their faces. Yay, this is great kind of thing. Because they're standing up for what they do want,
Exactly.
It's just such a representation of what we're both talking about here. I do want to mention as well, aspects to the new moon. We've talked quite a bit about Pluto and Saturn and the South Node because they're so prevalent because of the two retrogrades and it's all happening together. And these three are going to basically be together for quite some time. Well, the node will move on, but Saturn and Pluto particularly. But also Neptune. Neptune is aspecting this new moon and also in aspect to the lunar nodes on that. And Neptune moves so slowly, and Neptune's influence is so subtle, but I keep seeing him being triggered, and each time Neptune is aspected and each time he aspects other things, I do think our spiritual awareness is raising up and up and up. But he's so slow and subtle that, it's a person here and a person here are having an awakening. Then it ripples out to a few more people, and more people are kind of waking up to what I would call real connected spirituality rather than these kind of top-down belief systems that we've been under for so long. I kind of find it. I went to my yoga studio before we did this, and there's a lovely guy. He's there, and we've never talked, but we were the first two there. So we sat and talked, and he actually moved to this country for the LDS Church, typical, another patriarchal institution. But he said, I had my awakening 2 years ago. You hear just almost people you wouldn't expect using this word all the time now. And here's Neptune again, aspecting everything on this new moon chart. So I think it's going to be another kind of group of souls awakening, if you like. So incidentally,
yes, absolutely. It actually feels very emotional. I can feel
it does. Can I just mention, though, talking of churches and monoliths, the temple in Salt Lake is closing down for renovations. That we got interesting today. I know, and I was like, wonder if it will ever open again.
Yes, in the same way, right? It'd be
Yes.
interesting to see what land they built that temple on, because they looked.
Yeah.
They looked at all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
pretty fascinating. I was just going to say, I didn't realize you were still talking. Sorry.
No, it's a,
The Neptune aspect feels very emotional because, of course, Neptune dissolves everything.
yeah.
And this idea of dissolving old spiritual habits or hideouts, right? It's kind of like being in prison and rising up, and so fateful when you think how it's connected to the nodes, because
Yeah.
this is a very fateful node combo, right? With the being in these two cardinal signs
Mm.
um, of our home or our roots, and then our standing in the world, or what we believe is our mission, right? Our divine mission, which has kind of been mixed up. It used to be something very sacred, the work we did in the world, and now we're coming back to that being sacred, and it establishing our roots for ourselves in that aspect, right? Like, who
Absolutely.
are we and what do we do is very much linked. It's like that divine line that carries us through our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, looking at other connections that are coming up, I started at the beginning by talking about Mars going out of bounds tomorrow on the 20th. He's out of bounds till June the 15th, but I believe he goes back in bounds conjunct that North Node in Cancer. So,
Wow.
I love how the universe kind of these cycles. It's like here we have the nodes aspected now, where we're sitting here on April the 19th and June the 15th, way ahead, the nodes come back in for another reason. And I just love how the universe just kind of one thing follows on to another. A lot of astrologers, and no, I don't. That's horrible. Some astrologers, they look at things very compartmentalized and don't look at the very big cycles. And let's see how. Oh, this happens today, but this leads to this happening here tomorrow, and this tomorrow, and this tomorrow. Yeah, so it's unfair to say a lot of astrologers do.
Yeah, you make a good point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
So
let's say old school. This is an old
it
school
is.
idea that's sorry.
Or is your internet still?
Yeah, your voice keeps going in and out. It's so strange. Stillness. I don't know when you're talking and you're not. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Strange energies we're having. This is
It all seems fine.
right. I did want to. I think you're absolutely good. Good. Inspiring indeed. Spire. Remember we talked about Spire. That's the the Notre Dame thing. That's interesting. I agree that this is all over time, and that every little piece, it's like the 1, 2, 3, everything, step by step, things happen. We may not see it, but we've got to recognize that even we are changing slowly. So we have to give ourselves room. We have to breathe. We have to allow, like, oh, people that we've looked at and thought they'll never change are changing, and that's amazing. And so we can just open ourselves up and our hearts up to recognize, if you are changing, we open our hearts, we welcome you in, because we want something different. And I think that's just part of the whole thing. It's softening all of us up if we choose, like we can choose the softening.
And some
Also
people
wanted to mention this very interesting fact. Wait, are you talking?
go on. No, you go.
Okay. I just want to mention this interesting fact. I talked about the moon and the sun being at 14 degrees, which is a 5. This is about freedom. This is about being present in the now, kind of liberating ourselves, allowing for change, because change is what brings us into new things. And we have numerous planets at 23. We have Eris, we have Jupiter, we have Pluto. So that's also a 5. So very powerful. There's so much 5 energy. It's just like this energy of liberation that's just showing us there are two ways to turn. You can, put a lot of effort into keeping things alive that are dying, or you can kind of move towards this idea of this grand adventure and, create the things you desire by actually moving towards them.
I love the word liberation. One of my favorite words. And of course, we've talked about it before on this podcast, this number 23. It weaves throughout this year, the number 23. Kind of anchored by Eris, who spends most of the year at 23, the goddess of discord, who is shaking that apple up more. Kind of goddess energy is kind of, she's revealing what's hidden behind the picket fence and the facade and the artifice of our society. And quite frankly, and I know Notre Dame will be rebuilt, of course, but it has revealed how we're more concerned about the man-made things, than some of the natural wonders of the world, kind of thing. So I think she's revealed that kind of shallow kind of thing. Well,
I think also this is part of our illusion. Like, this is kind of the veils of illusion. Like, we have kind of worshipped an ideology that worships a building. Like, oh, this thing, this artifact needs to stay because it means so much. And we are putting all that intention to these things we're looking at, and not looking at the people that are suffering, or the earth that is suffering. We're not looking at how we're abusing all this other stuff. We're just looking at all these pretty buildings and going, oh, they've got history and they're powerful and wonderful and we've got to save them. But what are we actually, wanting to save? Because the truth is, the idea of being a savior is like a total patriarchal bullshit thing, right?
Serious.
We're not here to save other people, same as like, it's almost like we have charity but we're so powerful, we can save the earth and we can save this one and that one, when the truth is we're supposed to work together. Like, the earth is equal or even more powerful than us individually. And so this is how we can, quote unquote, save the world, is by kind of getting back to who we are, and then listening to what the earth has to say. Listen to what people say that we don't necessarily agree with. Right.
Exactly.
Because maybe we can communicate. Again, that's the Gemini energy of what this is about. And I caught the fact that Mars, that I know we talked about him quite a bit, still in Gemini at this new moon, 22 degrees, which is a very potent number of coming into balance, coming to peace. It's the architect of peace number, coming to peace with how we use this energy, our fire, our libido energy, our Martian kind of drive to make things happen. Like, we've used it to kind of push people out and to say, oh, well, we must save these pretty buildings. And now we've got to use it to speak about those that cannot speak.
Maybe Mars being out of bounds will be amazing this time. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be the frustrations. Mars, he's a bit of a wild devil when he's out of bounds, but but maybe he'll be coming up with ideas we've never thought of before, and saying things that we wouldn't dare say before, and things like that in Gemini. So 22, that's very powerful too. Of course, 22 is the degree of a different sign that Saturn and Pluto will connect at exactly on January 12th, 2020.
And 22 is a 4 as well, so we have quite a few 4s going on here. And it's that fateful energy of grounding what we believe in. It's the fire into the earth, and this is a key part of this whole Martian thing. Like, this Mars energy that is irritating us, is that we have to recognize it's not irritating us just to annoy us. It's irritating us to create a pull. So what are we doing? What kind of pull are we creating here? And what do we want to do with this information that we're being given through our minds by the anger that is either being raised in us or raised in the people we're dealing with. Like, what do we want to do with that, right? We can be very creative because this is
Oh,
our
yeah.
mind. This is Mercury. We can come up with all these ideas, and we have the support of all the female goddessy energies we talked about.
Of course, I actually just realised I didn't highlight that Vesta is also at 14 degrees of a different sign of Aries, and Vesta being the keeper of the flame, the hearth, and she's at 14 degrees Aries, conjunct Venus, the ruler of the new moon.
Oh, yes.
So we have yet another 14 in the chart, or another 5. And Vesta and Venus, they've got that very priestessy kind of energy from the ancient times. So there's some more for you too. So
Exactly, right. That's very powerful. The keeper of the flame, with the kind of, this idea of creation or procreation, is, this idea of Venus, or whatever you call her. She's the traditional kind of goddess that is in all cultures, of rising out of the water, birthing life. And I'm just thinking about how that famous painting of Venus, I think it's a Raphael with Venus like on the half shell, that kind
oh
of
yes, yeah,
as
yeah.
a pearl, right? This idea of being a pearl. And we've been talking about the idea of creating pearls. And this is, we talk about, you mentioned Pallas Athena, right? That's pearls of wisdom. There are so many different pearls, but these are such sacred energies too. And they're pearls in the card that I picked, right?
Of course.
So it's very interesting. I think if we think about this idea of what are we creating, or what are we choosing to put our, anger or passion into, as opposed to just, we were only allowed one kind of use of passion, and that was anger, right? That's the only one that was acceptable in our world.
Yeah. Now we're moving, thank heavens. Shall we get to the symbols?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want to go first this time?
Sure, I will go first. So let's make sure I have the right one. Taurus, 15 degrees.
Yes.
Head covered with a rakish silk hat, muffled against the cold, a man braves a storm. And the keynote is the courage needed to meet the crisis or crises precipitated by social ambition. So some of the what they're saying is the man with the silk hat has seen some of his ambitious efforts bring him social success, but he learns that often nothing fails like success. The storm may be within him, or it may attack his social status. He is ready to face it daringly. This shows a willingness to accept crises and go through them, and therefore great character, the soil upon which a higher kind of consciousness may develop. So this is the 5th and final stage of this particular area, and implies a transition to a new level at which the individual who has learned from experience demonstrates a truly mature mind. What is revealed here is character under adverse circumstances.
I think that's very very in line with everything we've been talking about. It's kind of the outer world success, but what's underneath is what your real character is, or real values.
Right. The joyful aspect when you have it at a rakish angle.
Yeah, of course, that too. Now the Chandra symbols, when I first read the first line of it, I was a bit like, oh, but bear in mind this new moon is Venus ruled, and Venus, one of her representations is love. So the symbol is his best friend sings a song at his funeral. And it says, love penetrates all barriers. It arises the greatest wherever it is most profoundly needed. And it's perpetually astonishing in its fullness, its rich sustaining power. Love is also held in a grieving and a mourning for what was and is no longer. And sometimes love becomes enwrapped in a twilight mood and can no longer see through the sentiments and the attachments to touch the limitless source of love, staying attuned to that place. Love can be a rocky ride. It pulls in lessons, it feels too much, and love is wedded to death, which it sometimes wishes to divorce itself from. Love is a limitless doorway and discovers how to navigate all the realms it is called into fluently, willingly, and gladly, stripping away all the ideas about what it should look like and how everything needs to be to gratify and appease and make secure when love needs none of these things to endure. So that's saying a similar thing in a way, that, you know, it's what's underneath the love that counts and the character underneath.
Right, and very brilliant. I think it's quite a impactful, considering we talked about the this idea of the building. There's that's kind of the man singing at his friend's funeral. We have a lot of nostalgia for what has been, and we're trying to hold on to it, and that actually prevents us from experiencing love and kind of exchanging it with others, right? This is the immortal quality of love, right? Love is the thing that sustains immortality, and it also sustains us for how we create new things, how we go forward. If we go forward with love and joy and that silk hat and all of that, it's all fun.
And it reminds me of my mood at the moment, walking around going, the patriarchy's dying. Yay! People get very offended by it. They're usually men.
Oh, of course. Pretty hilarious. They have a lot of change to make too, like we all do, right? Yeah. I guess it's hard getting off your pedestal where you've never had to deal with being somebody who's had to suffer certain things because of who you are. Yeah. And so if you've never had that, you don't have any recognition of it. And now when you have to get off your pedestal and say, oh, this is what it feels like. Oh, not so great.
And I'm just going around laughing about it because I think it's all great and joyful, and it's going to be so much more joyful life when we're all, anyway.
And one thing I wanted to say about your joy, which I think is really amazing, we need to look at everything that's happening as much as we can through the eyes of joy.
Yeah.
Is what happens when we laugh about all this stuff. We're actually sending healing energy into the world. We're making space where there hasn't been space. We're bringing light into dark. And that's, what's more powerful than that?
For sure. So, Jen, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. They can find me at jenduchene.com. That's my website. I'm also have a Facebook group, the Light Club of the Woo-Woo Weirdos of the World. And of course, you can find me on Medium, on Instagram, Facebook. I'm all over the place. Jen Duchene.
And I'm Louise Edington, and you can find me at louiseedington.com. Just don't look at my website for a few days too closely because it reverted to a year-old version due to a technical difficulty, but that's being fixed. Anyway, but everything's on there still. And you can find me on Facebook, Louise Edington, my Facebook group, Planetary Magic Cafe, Louise Edington Astrologer Facebook page. I'm on Instagram. I write almost every day on medium.com. And I also have my membership group, which was my Patreon, but I'm moving from Patreon to one attached to my website. So unless do you have any final words, Jen?
Final words? I don't, unless you want to ask me if the Akashic.
Oh yes. Do the Akashic Masters have anything to say about, let's say, what's being revealed at the moment?
What's being revealed? Okay, so the first thing I hear them saying is just breathe. They're like kind of like, oh, okay, this panic, you just got to remember to breathe. So what they're saying is that we're all being shown what is possible. Now, it's interesting because we've looked for this. We have kind of called for help. Help us, let us be who we are. And yet now that it's here, it's not what we were expecting. Like we were expecting it to be, easy. Oh, I just get to live in a big house and I have a big car. But of course that wouldn't serve the world or us.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying it is a trying time. They're not going to say that it isn't going to be trying, but it's like you have to adopt methods that will support you. So the breathing, the contemplation, the kind of going inward. Take as much time as you need to go inward and check on kind of your creative process. How are you coming to terms with what you value, and start conversation with not just other people, inviting them into conversation, go places, kind of smiling and bringing your energy, but also with other beings, if you're in connection with them, with the earth, with the trees, with the plants, kind of begin to see these aspects as your kind of allies in this, right? And your equals. And you'll begin to feel more grounded, because this is part of it. You've got to feel more grounded, more connected. You've got to remember and realize where you are, right? And this is very exciting, because this is the opportunity for all of us to get in touch with our free will. So this is kind of a very exciting ride. They're kind of showing me there's like this, wheel, and then there's this this whole, like, when you're in a plane or something, you have all this like board where you can press buttons and do all this stuff. So it's kind of like that. It's like, oh, you mean I get to go wherever I want and do this and that and that? And they're like, yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that how you respond to what you receive, just kind of expands it, right? So if you think, oh, shit, this is nothing, and you don't see what's in front of you, then you're going to be constantly seeking for something you're never going to find. If you start going, saying, oh, wow, isn't this awesome? Like you, Lou, going, oh, the patriarchy's over, yay! It's like, you're helping it along, but you're also directing how you want to experience this. And so that's what they're saying. Like we are learning how involved we really are in all of these experiences. So to take heart and take light.
And a quick last word from me. Venus and Taurus is about manifestation. So that ties in with that as well for the Taurus moon. So we better go, because I have a lot to do before I travel tomorrow. But it's goodbye from Lou.
And goodbye from Jen.